Colorado Territory, 1858. The water of Eagle Creek caught the dying sunlight in ripples of amber and gold. 12-year-old Catherine Thornton knelt at its edge, her small hands cupped to catch the cool mountain water. Her father's military expedition had made camp a quarter-mile back, but she had slipped away, drawn by the sound of rushing water and the promise of solitude. Her father, Colonel James Thornton, had brought her west after her mother's death, unable to bear the empty rooms of their Boston home. "You'll be safer with me than with relatives," he had said, though Catherine sometimes wondered if it was he who couldn't bear to be alone. The colonel commanded Fort Collins with an iron will, determined to bring order to what he called the savage wilderness. Catherine splashed water on her face, washing away the dust of the day's journey. That's when she felt it, a presence, not threatening but watchful. She looked up slowly. Across the narrow creek stood a boy, perhaps a year older than herself, an Apache boy. His dark eyes regarded her with a mixture of curiosity and caution. Neither spoke, neither moved. Catherine had heard her father's men speak of the Apache, cruel, merciless, inhuman, but the boy before her seemed none of these things. He wore a simple deerskin shirt, a knife at his belt, his long black hair tied back with a leather cord. His face was solemn, his stance proud. When he finally moved, it was to kneel at the creek's edge, mirroring her position. The water flowed between them, a boundary and a connection. "I'm Catherine," she said softly, though she doubted he understood English. The boy tilted his head slightly, studying her pale skin, her auburn hair falling in waves to her shoulders. Then, to her surprise, he responded in careful, accented English. "Takoda. It means friend to all," he added after a moment. Catherine couldn't help but smile. "Do you live nearby?" Takoda nodded toward the mountains. "My people are camped in the shadow of the tall peaks." He hesitated. "Your people, they are soldiers." It wasn't a question, but Catherine nodded. "My father is their leader." Something flickered in Takoda's eyes, understanding, perhaps, or wariness. He should have left then. They both knew it would be dangerous for him to be discovered, but neither child moved. Instead, Takoda reached into a small pouch at his waist and withdrew something. He extended his hand across the narrow creek. In his palm lay a small stone, polished smooth, with bands of red and gold running through it. "For courage," he said simply. Catherine hesitated only a moment before reaching out. Their fingertips brushed as she took the stone, and something inexplicable passed between them. A current, a recognition, a sense of something ancient and unnamed. Her eyes widened, meeting his. He had felt it too. She could see it in his expression. A distant voice called Catherine's name. Her father's aide, searching for her. "I must go," she whispered. Takoda nodded once, then melted into the shadows of the pines as silently as he had appeared. Catherine clutched the stone in her palm, feeling its warmth before slipping it into the pocket of her dress. Only then did she answer the calls, making her way back to camp. That night, lying in her tent, she held the stone to her heart, replaying the strange meeting in her mind. She didn't understand what had happened at the creek, but she knew with absolute certainty that she would see Takoda again. 7 years later, Catherine stood at the window of her father's house on the edge of Fort Collins, watching as the sun sank behind the mountains. At 19, she had grown into a young woman of quiet strength. Her time in the West had tanned her skin and put gold highlights in her auburn hair, though her green eyes remained as vivid as ever. "Catherine," her father's voice called from his study. "Come in here, please." She sighed, knowing what was coming. Another lecture about her future, about her obligation to marry suitably. Since her 18th birthday, Colonel Thornton had been increasingly fixated on seeing her settled. "Yes, father?" she said, entering the book-lined room where he sat behind his massive oak desk. Colonel Thornton had aged in the last 7 years, his once dark hair now steel grey, lines etched deeply around his mouth and eyes. The frontier had hardened him, as had the ongoing conflict with the native tribes. "Captain Elliot will be joining us for dinner tomorrow evening," he said without preamble. "I expect you to be gracious." Catherine maintained a neutral expression. "Of course. He's a fine officer, distinguished himself in the campaign against the Cheyenne. He'll be promoted to major by year's end." "Is that all that matters to you, father? Military rank?" The colonel's eyes narrowed. What should matter more? He can provide for you, protect you. In this territory, that's no small consideration. Catherine turned away, looking out the window again. In the distance, she could see the outline of Eagle Peak, where she had met Takoda all those years ago, where she still met him, whenever she could slip away unnoticed. "I'm not afraid of this territory," she said quietly. "You should be," her father replied, his voice hard. "The Apache have been raiding settlements to the south. 3 families murdered last month alone." "Not all Apache are raiders," Catherine said before she could stop herself. The colonel rose from his desk. "What would you know of it? You've been sheltered here at the fort." If only he knew. Catherine bit her tongue to keep from responding. For 7 years she had kept her secret. For 7 years she and Takoda had met in the shadows, first as curious children, then as friends, and now as something more. Something she dared not name, even to herself. "I'll wear my blue dress tomorrow," she said, changing the subject. "Will that be suitable?" Her father nodded, momentarily appeased. "Captain Elliot will appreciate it. He mentioned how becoming it was at the officers' ball last month." Catherine nodded and excused herself, retreating to her room. Once alone, she pulled open the drawer of her bedside table and took out the stone Takoda had given her. Its surface was worn smooth from years of her fingers tracing its contours. She had promised to meet him tonight at their usual place by Eagle Creek. As darkness fell, she waited until the house grew quiet. Her father retired early, exhausted from a day of administrative duties. When his snores echoed down the hallway, Catherine slipped a dark shawl around her shoulders and eased out her bedroom window. She knew the path by heart, could have walked it blindfolded. The night was cool, stars scattered across the sky like diamond dust. An owl called somewhere in the distance. Catherine moved swiftly, her heart beating faster with each step that brought her closer to him. The clearing by Eagle Creek was their sanctuary. Takoda was already there, a silent figure in the moonlight. At 20, he had grown tall and strong, his face bearing the dignified features of his ancestors. He wore the traditional clothing of his people, though Catherine knew he also owned settler clothes for the rare occasions when he needed to move anonymously through white settlements. "I feared you wouldn't come," he said softly as she approached. "I'll always come," she replied, stepping into his embrace. His arms encircled her, strong and gentle. Catherine rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. These moments were stolen, precious and increasingly dangerous. The hostility between the settlers and the Apache had only grown over the years. "My father is trying to marry me off," she murmured against the rough fabric of his shirt. "To Captain Elliot." Takoda's body tensed slightly, though his voice remained calm. "The one with the scar across his chin? Who led the attack on the Cheyenne village?" Catherine nodded. "He's coming to dinner tomorrow." Takoda stepped back just enough to look into her eyes. His hand came up to cup her cheek. "And what will you do?" "Refuse him, of course." She leaned into his touch. "I belong with you. I have since that first day at the creek." The words hung between them, weighted with all they had come to mean to each other. They had spent countless hours together over the years, Takoda teaching her the ways of his people, Catherine sharing books and ideas from the world beyond the mountains. They had learned each other's languages, shared stories and dreams, watched the seasons change from the hidden places where they could be together in safety. And gradually, inevitably, they had fallen in love. "My people also wish me to marry," Takoda said, his voice low. "Nalin, the daughter of a respected elder." Catherine felt a stab of jealousy, though she knew she had no right to it. "Is she beautiful?" A ghost of a smile touched Takoda's lips. "She is considered so." "And do you care for her?" "I respect her." His hand moved from her cheek to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. "But my heart has been given since I was 13 years old, Catherine. It cannot be given twice." She closed her eyes, overwhelmed by the simple truth in his words. When she opened them again, determination had replaced uncertainty. "We could leave," she whispered. "Go north to Canada, or south to Mexico. Somewhere we could be together." Takoda's expression grew serious. "And leave our families, our peoples, if that's what it takes." He was silent for a long moment, considering her words. Finally, he said, "There's a place my grandfather showed me, high in the mountains. a hidden valley where the rivers meet. If we had to run, that's where I would take you. Catherine lifted her face to his. Promise me that if they try to separate us, we'll go there. I promise, he said, and sealed the vow with a kiss. Their lips met gently at first, then with growing urgency. Catherine wrapped her arms around his neck, pressing herself against him as if she could somehow merge their very beings. His hands spanned her waist, steady and sure. In these moments, the divisions that society had placed between them, race, culture, history, dissolved into nothingness. They were simply two souls who had recognized each other, against all odds. When they finally parted, breathless, Catherine rested her forehead against his. I should go back before I'm missed. Takoda nodded, though he made no move to release her. 2 nights from now, same time. Yes, she promised. I'll be here. He brushed his lips against her forehead before letting her go. Until then, keep the stone close. I always do. Catherine reluctantly stepped away, already feeling the cold seep in where his warmth had been. She turned to leave, then looked back once more. Takoda stood motionless in the moonlight, his eyes never leaving her. In that moment, she knew with absolute certainty that whatever came, they would face it together. Neither of them noticed the figure watching from the shadow of the pines, or heard the quiet withdrawal of boots through the underbrush. Captain William Elliot prided himself on being a man of discipline and control. His 11 years in the U.S. Army had taught him to maintain a calm exterior, regardless of circumstance. It was this training that kept his expression pleasant as he sat across from Catherine Thornton at dinner the following evening, despite the rage boiling beneath his skin. The venison is excellent, Colonel, he said, cutting another piece with precision. Your cook has outdone herself. Colonel Thornton nodded approvingly. Mrs. Hatcher came west with us from Boston. Couldn't run a proper household without her. Catherine said nothing, moving food around her plate without eating much. She wore the blue dress as promised, her hair arranged in an elegant knot at the nape of her neck. She was beautiful, Elliot thought, and duplicitous. He had followed her the previous night out of simple curiosity. When she had slipped away from the fort, he had assumed she was meeting some young lieutenant. That would have been scandalous enough, but manageable. What he had witnessed instead was far worse. An Apache. She was consorting with an Apache man, embracing him, kissing him. The memory made Elliot's hand tighten around his knife. He had nearly drawn his pistol then and there, but caution had prevailed. Better to think, to plan, to use this knowledge strategically. Catherine, the colonel said sharply, Captain Elliot asked you a question. She looked up, startled. I'm sorry, my thoughts were elsewhere. Clearly, her father said with disapproval. The captain asked about your interest in the new lending library in town. Oh, yes, it's quite nice. They received a shipment of books from Chicago last month. Elliot smiled thinly. I've always believed that a well-read woman makes the finest companion, though of course there are limits to what is suitable reading material for ladies. Catherine's eyes flashed. And who determines these limits, Captain? Men who fear educated women might begin to think for themselves. Catherine! Colonel Thornton's voice cracked like a whip. Elliot held up a hand. No, it's quite all right, Colonel. I appreciate Miss Thornton's spirit. He turned his gaze back to Catherine. I only meant that some books contain ideas that might lead a young woman astray. Ideas about equality between races, for instance. Dangerous notions that contradict the natural order. Catherine's face paled slightly, though her voice remained steady. Perhaps the natural order is not so divinely ordained as some would have us believe. A tense silence fell over the table. Colonel Thornton cleared his throat. Perhaps we should move to the sitting room for coffee. An excellent suggestion, Elliot agreed, rising and offering his arm to Catherine. She had no choice but to take it, her fingers barely touching his sleeve. As they walked from the dining room, Elliot leaned slightly closer. I know where you were last night, he murmured, his voice pitched low enough that only she could hear. And with whom? Catherine stumbled slightly, her eyes darting to his face. What she saw there made her blood run cold. Knowledge, calculation, threat. I don't know what you mean, she said, her voice barely audible. I think you do. His smile never reached his eyes. We'll discuss it later, when we have more privacy. The remainder of the evening passed in a blur for Catherine. She poured coffee, responded to questions automatically, and played the piano when asked, all while her mind raced with panic. Elliot knew. Somehow he knew about Takoda, and he would use that knowledge. She had no doubt of that. When Captain Elliot finally took his leave, he kissed her hand, his fingers pressing painfully into hers. "Until tomorrow, Miss Thornton. I look forward to our ride." "Ride?" she echoed. "Yes," her father interjected. "I've given Captain Elliot permission to escort you on a ride tomorrow afternoon. The weather promises to be fine." Catherine wanted to refuse, to plead illness, but the warning look in Elliot's eyes stopped her. "How thoughtful," she managed. After the captain had gone and her father had retired to his study with a glass of brandy, Catherine fled to her room. She paced the floor, mind whirling. She needed to warn Takoda. They needed to leave, now tonight, before Elliot could act on what he knew. She changed quickly into her simplest dress, stuffed a few essential items into a small bag, and penned a brief note to her father. It would break his heart, but she had no choice. She couldn't bear the thought of Takoda in danger because of her. Just as she was preparing to slip out her window, a knock came at her bedroom door. Catherine froze. "Catherine?" Her father's voice. "May I come in?" She hastily shoved the bag under her bed. "Yes, father." Colonel Thornton entered, still holding his brandy glass. His expression was unreadable as he closed the door behind him. "Captain Elliot has asked for your hand in marriage." Catherine's heart sank. "Father, I told him I would discuss it with you, but that I saw no impediment to the match." He took a sip of brandy. "He's a fine officer with excellent prospects." "I don't love him." The colonel waved this away. "Love comes with time and respect. My marriage to your mother began as one of convenience, but grew into deep affection." "This is different," Catherine insisted. "I cannot marry Captain Elliot. I won't." Her father studied her face. "There's someone else." It wasn't a question. Catherine said nothing, her silence answer enough. The colonel sighed heavily. "Who is he?" "One of the young lieutenants. Chambers, perhaps. He's been making eyes at you for months." "No," Catherine said quietly. "No one you would approve of." Her father's expression hardened. "What does that mean?" Catherine straightened her shoulders. "It means I've made my choice, father, and it isn't Captain Elliot." For a long moment Colonel Thornton said nothing. Then he drained his glass and set it down on her dresser with a sharp click. "You're upset. We'll discuss this in the morning when you've had time to reconsider. I won't change my mind. We shall see." He moved to the door, then paused. "I've given orders that no one is to leave the fort tonight without my express permission, for your own safety." The door closed behind him with terrible finality. Catherine sank onto her bed, her mind racing. Her father's words had been clear. She was effectively a prisoner. She could not warn Takoda, could not run away, could do nothing but wait for tomorrow's confrontation with Elliot. She clutched Takoda's stone in her palm, its familiar contours offering little comfort now. Whatever happened tomorrow, she knew with grim certainty that her life was about to change forever. The next day dawned bright and clear, as if mocking Catherine's inner turmoil. She dressed mechanically in her riding habit, a dark green wool that complemented her coloring. Her maid Mary chattered as she helped arrange Catherine's hair, oblivious to her mistress's distress. "Captain Elliot is such a handsome man," Mary said, securing a pin, "and so distinguished with that scar, makes him look like a hero from a novel." Catherine said nothing. To her, the scar that bisected Elliot's chin was a mark of cruelty, not valor. She had overheard him boasting once about how he'd received it, fighting Cheyenne warriors, women and children among them. At precisely 2 o'clock, he arrived to escort her on their ride. Catherine descended the stairs with leaden feet. Her father stood in the foyer, beaming with approval at the picture they made. The dashing officer and the colonel's daughter, a perfect match in the eyes of frontier society. "Don't stay out too long," Colonel Thornton cautioned. "There have been reports of Apache in the area." Elliot's smile was cold. "I assure you, sir, I'm more than capable of handling any Apache we might encounter." They rode out from the fort, Catherine on her dappled mare and Elliot on a large bay gelding. He led them along the main road for a time, until they were well out of sight of the fort's sentries. Then he abruptly turned off onto a narrower trail that wound toward the foothills. "Where are we going?" Catherine asked, the first words she had spoken since they departed. "Somewhere we can talk privately." Elliot's voice was pleasant, conversational, as if they were discussing the weather. "About your Apache lover?" Catherine's hands tightened on the reins. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Please, Miss Thornton, let's not insult each other's intelligence." He guided his horse closer to hers. "I saw you 2 nights ago, by the creek. A most touching reunion." She said nothing, her mind calculating. If she turned her horse now, could she outrun him back to the fort? No, his gelding was faster, stronger, and what would be the point? To return to her father, who would only lock her away more securely. "What do you want?" she asked finally. Elliot smiled. "The same thing I've always wanted, you as my wife." "Never. Consider the alternatives, my dear." His voice hardened. "If I tell your father what I saw, he'll have your Apache friend hunted down and hanged. And you'll be sent east in disgrace, probably to some dreary aunt who'll keep you under lock and key until you're old and grey." Catherine felt ill. "Why would you want to marry someone who despises you?" "Because you're Colonel Thornton's daughter. Because with his backing I'll make general before I'm 40. Elliot's face was impassive. "And because you're beautiful, well-bred, and will make an excellent hostess as I rise through the ranks. I'll run away." "To where? With whom?" "You're savage." He laughed softly. "I've already dispatched men to find his camp. By nightfall he'll either be dead or in chains." Catherine's blood turned to ice. "You're lying." "Am I?" Elliot raised an eyebrow. "Lieutenant Reed and 6 men rode out at dawn. They're quite efficient. Particularly Reed. He has a personal grudge against the Apache after what happened to his brother at San Carlos." Her mind raced. She had to warn Takoda somehow. His people's camp was well hidden in the mountains, but determined soldiers might find it. Or worse, they might find Takoda alone, making his way to their meeting place. "If you harm him," she said, her voice low and fierce, "I will never forgive you. I will make every day of our marriage a living hell." Elliot's expression didn't change. "You'll learn to accept your situation, as women always do, and in time, you might even come to appreciate me. I can be quite persuasive." The threat in his words was unmistakable. Catherine straightened in her saddle, summoning every ounce of her courage. "Take me back to the fort. Now." "Not yet. First, you'll give me your answer." Elliot moved his horse directly in front of hers, blocking her path. "Will you marry me willingly, or shall I tell your father about your Apache?" Catherine stared at him, hatred burning in her eyes. "If I agree, will you call off your men?" "Leave Takoda alone." Something flickered in Elliot's expression. "Takoda, is that his name?" He smiled thinly. "How touching that you're on such intimate terms." "Answer me," Catherine demanded. "Will you leave him alone if I agree to marry you?" Elliot considered this. "I suppose I could recall Lieutenant Reed, as a wedding gift to my bride." She didn't believe him for a moment, but what choice did she have? She needed time. Time to warn Takoda. Time to formulate a plan. "Very well," she said, the words like ashes in her mouth. "I'll marry you." Elliot's smile was triumphant. "I knew you'd be sensible." He reached into his coat pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. "I came prepared, you see." He opened it to reveal a gold ring with a single diamond. It was beautiful, expensive, and to Catherine, it represented a prison more confining than any cell. "Your hand, my dear," Elliot prompted, when she made no move to accept it. Reluctantly, Catherine extended her left hand. Elliot took it in his own, his touch making her skin crawl, and slid the ring onto her finger. It felt heavy, wrong. "Now," he said, "let's return to the fort and share our happy news with your father." As they turned their horses back toward the road, Catherine's mind was already working. She would find a way to get word to Takoda. They would meet tonight in their secret place, and then they would run. To the hidden valley he had spoken of, or beyond, to some place where Elliot and her father could never find them. She touched the stone in her pocket, drawing strength from it. This was not the end. It was merely another obstacle to overcome. What she didn't know was that fate had already set other events in motion, events that would change everything. Lieutenant Thomas Reed had never considered himself a cruel man. Determined, yes. Efficient, certainly, but not cruel. Yet as he led his men through the foothills, tracking signs of Apache movement, he felt a darkness within him that he barely recognized. The memory of his younger brother's mutilated body, found after the massacre at San Carlos, drove him forward like a physical force. Jacob had been just 20, newly assigned to the Arizona Territory, when Apache raiders struck his patrol. What they had done to him and the others defied description. "Sir," Private Wilson called softly, pointing to the ground. "Tracks. Fresh." Reed dismounted to examine them. One rider, moving fast. He looked up at the rocky terrain ahead. "He's heading for those cliffs." "Should we split up?" Sergeant Miller asked. "Cover more ground?" Reed considered this, then shook his head. "No. We stay together. If we find their camp, we'll need every man." What Captain Elliott had told him seemed far-fetched. The colonel's daughter involved with an Apache warrior. But Reed had learned not to question orders, only to execute them. Find the Apache camp. Locate a warrior named Takoda. Bring him in, alive if possible, dead if necessary. They continued their pursuit, the tracks leading them higher into the mountains. The air grew cooler, the pine trees casting long shadows across their path. Reed felt eyes on them, though he saw no one. The Apache were masters of concealment, he knew. They could be surrounded even now. "Keep alert," he warned his men. "Check your weapons." The tracks disappeared when they reached a rocky plateau, the hard ground revealing no footprints. Reed cursed under his breath. "We've lost him," Private Wilson said. "No," Reed replied, scanning the terrain. "He's leading us somewhere, or away from somewhere." He pointed to a narrow gap between two rock formations. "That way. It's the only logical path." They proceeded cautiously, rifles ready. The gap opened onto a small valley, bisected by a swift-running stream. At first glance it appeared empty. Then Reed saw it, a thin wisp of smoke rising from behind a stand of cottonwoods. He signaled his men to spread out and approach silently. Heart pounding, Reed moved forward, rifle raised. He expected to find a camp, perhaps a small band of hunters. What he found instead was a single teepee beside the stream, with a cooking fire smoldering nearby. A woman stood at the water's edge, filling a clay pot. She wore traditional Apache dress, her long black hair hanging in a single braid down her back. Reed hesitated. This wasn't the war party he had anticipated. Just one woman, alone. Then she turned, sensing their presence, and Reed saw her face. Young, beautiful, with eyes that widened in fear as she took in the soldiers emerging from the trees. She dropped the pot, which shattered on the rocks, and reached for something at her waist. A knife, Reed realized too late. "Hold," he shouted, but Private Wilson had already fired. The sound of the shot echoed across the small valley. The woman staggered backward, a look of surprise crossing her face as a crimson stain spread across the front of her dress. She fell to her knees, then toppled forward into the shallow water of the stream. "God damn it, Wilson!" Reed rounded on the young soldier. "I didn't give the order to fire." Wilson's face was pale. "She had a weapon, sir. I thought—" "You didn't think at all!" Reed pushed past him, splashing into the stream to reach the fallen woman. He turned her over gently, knowing it was already too late. The bullet had struck her heart. Her eyes stared sightlessly at the sky, her hand still clutching the small knife. Reed closed her eyes with his fingertips. "May God forgive us," he murmured. The sound of pounding hooves made him look up sharply. A rider was approaching at full gallop. An Apache warrior on a paint horse, his face a mask of fury and grief. "Take cover!" Reed shouted, pulling his pistol as he scrambled out of the stream. The warrior paid no heed to the soldiers or their weapons. He leapt from his horse while it was still in motion, rushing to the woman's body with a cry of anguish that needed no translation. "Hold your fire," Reed ordered, as his men raised their rifles. Something about this scene felt wrong, profoundly wrong. This wasn't an enemy combatant. This was a man finding his wife or lover murdered. The warrior cradled the woman's body, rocking her gently as he keened his grief to the sky. His anguish was so raw, so human, that Reed felt shame wash over him. This was what war really looked like. Not glory or valor, but this. A man holding his dead love in a stream running red with her blood. "Sir," Sergeant Miller whispered urgently. "What are your orders?" Reed hesitated. His orders were to find Takoda, the Apache who had been meeting with Catherine Thornton. Could this be him? The timing would fit, but Reed had no way of knowing for certain. Before he could decide, the warrior gently laid the woman's body on the bank of the stream and stood. His eyes, when they finally turned to the soldiers, burned with a hatred so pure it was almost beautiful in its intensity. "Which one of you killed her?" he asked in perfect English. The soldiers exchanged surprised glances. Reed stepped forward. "It was a mistake. She reached for a weapon." "A knife for skinning rabbits," the warrior said, his voice dangerously calm. "For our meal." Private Wilson shifted nervously, giving himself away. The warrior's gaze locked onto him. "She was to be my wife," he said. "Tomorrow we would have been joined before our people. Her name was Nalin." Reed felt sick. Nalin, not Catherine Thornton. This wasn't Takoda but some other Apache man, and they had just killed his bride-to-be. A terrible mistake. An unforgivable one. "I'm sorry," Reed said, knowing how inadequate the words were. "We can help you bury her. Give her proper—" "You will leave this place," the warrior cut him off. "You will leave her to our ways, and then I will hunt each of you, one by one, until justice is done." Reed believed him. The cold certainty in the man's eyes left no room for doubt. "We're leaving," he said to his men. "Mount up." "Sir," Sergeant Miller protested, Our orders were not to murder innocent women," Reed snapped. "Mount up, now." As they rode away, Reed looked back once. The warrior had returned to Nalin's side, gathering her body into his arms with infinite tenderness. The image would haunt Reed for the rest of his days. Catherine sat in her bedroom, the diamond ring heavy on her finger, as she penned a note to Takoda. She had to warn him, had to tell him to flee to their secret place in the mountains. But how to get the message to him? A soft knock at her door made her hastily conceal the note beneath a book. "Come in." Mary entered, carrying a tray with tea. "Thought you might need this, miss, after all the excitement." The engagement announcement had been met with great enthusiasm by the fort's residents. Colonel Thornton had ordered champagne from his private stores, and impromptu toasts had been raised to the happy couple. Catherine had maintained her composure through it all, smiling when appropriate, accepting congratulations with murmured thanks. Only her father had given her a searching look, as if sensing the falseness of her acquiescence. "Thank you, Mary," she said now, accepting the tea. An idea formed. "Mary, I wonder if I might ask a favor." The maid smiled. "Of course, miss. Could you take a note to someone for me?" Discreetly. Mary's eyes widened slightly. "A note, miss? To whom?" Catherine hesitated. Mary had been with her family for years, had practically raised her after her mother's death. If there was anyone she could trust. "I can't tell you that," she said finally, "and I can't tell you why, but it's important, more important than anything." Mary studied her face for a long moment. "This has something to do with your engagement, doesn't it? You don't want to marry the captain." Catherine's eyes filled with tears. "Please, Mary. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't a matter of life and death." The maid's expression softened. "Where would I need to take this note?" "To the bend in Eagle Creek, where the big cottonwood stands. Leave it in the hollow at the base of the tree." Catherine took Mary's hands in hers. "Tonight, after dark. Can you do that?" Mary hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, miss. I can do that." Relief flooded through Catherine. "Thank you. I'll never forget this kindness." After Mary left, Catherine finished her note to Takoda. "Danger. We've been discovered. Elliot has sent soldiers to find you. Meet me at our secret place in the mountains at midnight tomorrow. Bring only what you need. We must flee together. Always yours, C." She sealed it with a drop of wax, then handed it to Mary when the maid returned an hour later. As darkness fell, she watched from her window as Mary slipped from the servants' entrance, the precious note hidden in her apron pocket. That night, Catherine dreamed of blood and dust, of shots echoing across mountains, of Takoda calling her name as he was dragged away in chains. She woke, gasping, sheets tangled around her, the stone clutched so tightly in her palm that it had left an imprint. Morning brought Captain Elliot back to the Thornton home, ostensibly to discuss wedding plans, but really, Catherine knew, to ensure she hadn't fled in the night. His smile was all triumph as he took her arm to escort her to breakfast. "Lieutenant Reed returned late last night," he mentioned casually as they walked. "Unfortunately, his mission was less successful than anticipated." Catherine's heart leapt with hope. "Oh? Yes. A regrettable incident. They encountered some Apache and shots were fired. His grip on her arm tightened. A woman was killed. Tragic, really. The hope in Catherine's chest withered. A woman? Apparently the intended bride of one of their warriors. Not your Takoda, unfortunately. Elliot's voice was soft with malice. But it's only a matter of time before we find him too. Catherine felt ill. An innocent woman dead because of Elliot's vendetta against her and Takoda. "You're a monster," she whispered. "I'm a soldier, my dear. I do what's necessary." They had reached the dining room doorway. "Shall we join your father? He's quite eager to discuss dates for our nuptials." Through the long day that followed, Catherine moved as if in a nightmare. Plans were made, decisions announced. The wedding would take place in 2 weeks' time, soon enough to precede Captain Elliot's reassignment to Fort Laramie, where he would take up a position as second-in-command. "You'll love Laramie," Colonel Thornton assured her. "Much more civilized than our little outpost here." Catherine nodded mutely. None of it mattered. By this time tomorrow she would be gone, either safely away with Takoda or dead in the attempt. She would not marry William Elliot. She would not spend her life with a man who ordered the murder of innocents to satisfy his ambition. As night approached, she prepared with methodical care. She dressed in her simplest clothes, a sturdy brown skirt, white blouse, and leather boots. Over these, she wore a heavy shawl against the mountain cold. Into a small bag she packed only essentials, a change of clothes, the little money she had saved, her mother's locket, and a small knife her father had given her for protection. When the house grew quiet, she slipped from her window as she had done so many times before. The night was clear, stars scattered across the velvet sky. Catherine moved through the shadows at the edge of the fort, her heart pounding with fear and exhilaration. Once beyond the sentries, she would make her way to Eagle Creek, then follow it upstream to the hidden place where she and Takoda had agreed to meet. She was nearly at the fort's perimeter when a figure stepped from the shadows, blocking her path. "Going somewhere, Miss Thornton?" Captain Elliot stood before her, pistol in hand, his face harsh in the moonlight. Catherine's blood ran cold. "How did you—" "Your loyal maid isn't quite as loyal as you believed." His smile was cruel. "She brought your note directly to me. Very touching, by the way, always yours. Makes one wonder just how intimate your relationship with this savage has been." Catherine felt rage rise within her, hot and cleansing. "He's twice the man you are, 10 times 100. Elliot's face hardened. "You would choose an Apache over me, over your own kind." "My kind are those who value honor and decency," Catherine spat. "Not murderers who kill innocent women to satisfy their pride." Something dangerous flashed in Elliot's eyes. "You're confused, Catherine, overwhelmed by the excitement of your engagement. Your father and I agree that you need rest, absolute rest, until our wedding day." He gestured, and 2 soldiers emerged from the darkness behind him. "Take Miss Thornton to her room. Post a guard at her door and beneath her window. She's not to leave under any circumstances." "No!" Catherine lunged to the side, attempting to dart past him, but Elliot was faster. He caught her arm in a bruising grip. "This can be easy or difficult," he hissed. "But either way, you will be my wife in 2 weeks' time, and your Apache lover will be dead long before then." "I'll never marry you," Catherine said, each word distinct and laced with loathing. "Never." Elliot's smile was cold. "We shall see." The soldiers escorted her back to the house, one on each side, their faces impassive. Her father stood in the foyer, his expression a mixture of anger and disappointment. "You've disgraced yourself and this family," he said as she was led past him. "No, father," Catherine replied, her voice steady despite her tears. "You've done that yourself, by aligning with a man like him." In her room, the door locked behind her, Catherine sank onto her bed in despair. She had failed to escape, failed to warn Takoda. He would come to their meeting place, find her absent, perhaps wait for hours. And all the while, Elliot's men would be closing in. She touched the stone in her pocket, trying to draw strength from it, as she had so many times before. Takoda was clever, resourceful. He would sense the danger. He would not be captured easily. But even as she tried to reassure herself, Catherine knew the truth. She had set these events in motion by loving someone she was not supposed to love, and now they would both pay the price. Takoda knelt at the edge of Eagle Creek, fingers tracing the outline of a boot print in the soft mud. Soldiers had been here recently, many soldiers moving with purpose. He had come to retrieve Catherine's note, as was their custom, The hollow in the old cottonwood had been their mailbox for years, allowing them to communicate when they couldn't meet. But tonight, the hollow was empty. Unease settled in Takoda's stomach. Catherine had never failed to leave a note if their plans changed. Something was wrong. As he stood, a twig snapped somewhere in the darkness beyond the creek. Takoda froze, senses alert. Another snap, closer this time. He melted into the shadows of the cottonwood, hand moving silently to the knife at his belt. A figure emerged from the trees on the opposite bank. A woman, moving cautiously. Not Catherine. This woman was older, plumper, dressed in the plain clothes of a domestic servant. "Hello?" she called softly. "Is anyone there? I have a message." Takoda hesitated, wariness warring with curiosity. After a moment, he stepped from the shadows. "Who are you?" The woman startled, hand flying to her throat. "Oh, you must be... Are you Takoda?" He nodded once, still wary. "Who asks?" "I'm Mary, Miss Catherine's maid." The woman wrung her hands. "I've done a terrible thing. I betrayed her trust, but I've come to make it right if I can." Takoda crossed the shallow creek in 2 long strides. "What do you mean? Where is Catherine?" "Locked in her room," Mary said, tears welling in her eyes. "The captain, Captain Elliot, he forced me to give him the note she wrote you. Threatened to have my son dismissed from his position at the fort if I didn't. I was weak. I'm so sorry." Cold fear gripped Takoda's heart. "What did the note say?" "That you were in danger. That soldiers were looking for you. That you were to meet her in the mountains tomorrow at midnight to flee together." Mary wiped at her tears. "But now she's under guard, and the captain is sending more men to search the mountains at first light." Takoda processed this information quickly. "Why are you telling me this? Why risk helping us?" "Because I raised that girl from the time she was 12 years old," Mary said simply. "Because I've never seen her look at anyone the way she looks when she speaks of you, and because what they're doing to her, forcing her to marry that cruel man, it isn't right." For a moment, Takoda was silent, weighing options, calculating risks. Then he reached a decision. "Can you get a message to Catherine?" Mary nodded. "I think so. They let me bring her meals, tend to her needs. Tell her this: where the rivers meet, 3 days. Wait for the owl's call." Takoda's eyes held Mary's intently. "Can you remember that? Where the rivers meet, 3 days. Wait for the owl's call," Mary repeated. "I'll tell her, but how will she—" "She'll understand." Takoda turned to go, then paused. "Thank you, Mary." The woman smiled sadly. "Be careful, and make her happy if you can. She deserves that." Takoda melted back into the darkness, moving swiftly and silently through terrain he knew as intimately as his own heartbeat. He had much to do and little time to do it. Plans to make, supplies to gather, and most difficult of all, he would need to evade the soldiers who were surely already searching for him. But first, he had to warn his people. Catherine sat at her window, watching dawn break over the mountains. She hadn't slept, couldn't sleep, knowing that Takoda might be riding into a trap at that very moment. A soft knock at her door roused her from her dark thoughts. "Who is it?" "It's Mary, miss. With your breakfast." Catherine heard the key turn in the lock. Then Mary entered carrying a tray. The soldier posted outside her door glanced in briefly before closing it again. Mary set the tray on the small table by the window, then, to Catherine's surprise, took her hands and squeezed them. "Eat well, miss. You'll need your strength for your journey." Catherine stared at her, uncomprehending. "Journey?" Mary leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I saw him last night." "Your young man. He sent a message. Where the rivers meet, 3 days, wait for the owl's call." Hope bloomed in Catherine's chest, so sudden and fierce it was almost painful. "You saw Takoda? He's safe? For now. But you must be ready. 3 days." Mary straightened up, speaking normally again. "Your father says you may join him for dinner this evening, if you're feeling more cooperative." Catherine understood the game now. She nodded. "Please tell father I would be delighted to join him. And please apologize to Captain Elliot for my behavior yesterday. It was unbecoming." Mary's eyes twinkled with suppressed mirth. "Very good, miss. I'll tell them." After the maid left, Catherine ate her breakfast with genuine appetite. Takoda was alive. He had a plan, In 3 days they would meet at their special place, the hidden valley where two mountain streams converged, forming a single, stronger river. A place that symbolized their own union, two separate lives flowing together. All she had to do was maintain the pretense of acceptance for 3 days, then find a way to escape her guards. Simple. Catherine smiled grimly. Not simple at all, but necessary, and she would do whatever was necessary to be with Takoda. That evening she joined her father and Captain Elliot for dinner, the model of contrition. She apologized for her foolishness, blamed it on pre-wedding nerves, and agreed demurely to all their plans. The relief on her father's face was palpable. Only Elliot seemed suspicious, his eyes narrowing whenever she spoke. "I thought perhaps we might move the wedding forward," he suggested as they took coffee in the sitting room. "Next week rather than 2 weeks hence. Given Miss Thornton's delicate state of mind, a shorter engagement might be wise." Catherine forced herself to smile. "Whatever you think best, Captain." Colonel Thornton frowned. "I'm not sure that's necessary, William. The invitations have already been sent, and Catherine seems much improved tonight." "Perhaps," Elliot conceded, his eyes never leaving Catherine's face. "But I've learned that it's best not to delay once a decision has been made, particularly when dealing with unpredictable elements." Catherine understood his meaning perfectly. He didn't trust her apparent surrender, and he was right not to. For the next 2 days, she played her role flawlessly. She discussed wedding details with Mary, wrote notes to friends announcing her engagement, and even allowed Captain Elliot to escort her on a closely supervised walk around the fort's grounds. All the while, her mind worked furiously on her escape plan. The guard outside her door was changed every 6 hours, the one beneath her window every 4. There was a brief period, just after midnight, when both guards changed shifts simultaneously. That would be her opportunity. On the 3rd night, Catherine prepared with meticulous care. She dressed in dark clothes, packed her small bag as before, and added one crucial item, a coil of rope she had cut from her curtain cords and hidden beneath her mattress. Mary had smuggled in a pair of sturdy gloves to protect her hands during the descent. At midnight, Catherine secured one end of the rope to her heavy oak bedpost, testing it carefully to ensure it would hold her weight. Then she tossed the rest out the window, watching it uncoil down the side of the house. It wouldn't reach all the way to the ground. There would be a drop of several feet at the end, but it was the best she could manage. She pulled on the gloves, took a deep breath, and climbed out onto the window ledge. The descent was harder than she had anticipated. The rope bit into her hands despite the gloves, and her arms trembled with the strain of supporting her weight. Twice she nearly lost her grip, saved only by sheer determination. When she reached the end of the rope, she dangled for a moment, gauging the distance to the ground. Then she let go, landing in a crumpled heap but mercifully uninjured, save for a twisted ankle that protested sharply when she stood. Gritting her teeth against the pain, Catherine limped away from the house, keeping to the shadows. The changing of the guards had provided her window of opportunity, but she knew it wouldn't be long before her absence was discovered. She made her way to the edge of the fort, her heart pounding with each step. The main gate was heavily guarded, but there was a section of wall under repair that she had noticed during her walk with Elliot. If she could reach it unseen— A shout from behind her shattered the night's quiet. "The prisoner has escaped. Check the perimeter." Catherine abandoned caution for speed, sprinting toward the damaged section of wall despite the pain shooting through her ankle. Behind her, lanterns flared to life, voices called to each other, boots pounded on packed earth. She reached the wall, found the gap in the wooden stakes and squeezed through. Freedom lay just yards away, the dark embrace of the pine forest beyond the fort's clearing. "There, by the west wall." A rifle shot cracked through the night, the bullet splintering wood inches from her head. Catherine ran, ignoring the fire in her ankle, the burning in her lungs. She plunged into the forest, branches whipping her face as she fled blindly into the darkness. Behind her, the sounds of pursuit grew louder. Elliot would have every available man searching for her. But she had one advantage. She knew exactly where she was going. The hidden valley lay 10 miles to the northwest, a journey that would take most of the night on foot. Catherine pushed on, following the stars as Takoda had taught her. North by the North Star, west by the setting moon. Hour after hour, she walked, then ran, then limped when her injured ankle would bear no more. Dawn found her climbing the steep trail that led to the valley, her body exhausted but her spirit unbroken. She had done it. She had escaped. Now she just had to reach their meeting place and wait for Takoda's signal, the call of an owl, their private code since childhood. The trail crested a ridge and Catherine paused, catching her breath as she looked down into the valley below. It was as beautiful as she remembered, a small paradise hidden from the world, where two clear streams joined to form a river that wound through meadows bright with wildflowers. A place that had existed in her dreams for 7 years, ever since Takoda first brought her here. She made her way down the slope, each step sending spikes of pain through her ankle. By the time she reached the valley floor, the sun was high overhead. Catherine found a sheltered spot beside the larger of the two streams, concealed by a stand of willows, and sank down gratefully. Now there was nothing to do but wait. The day passed slowly. Catherine dozed fitfully, startling awake at every sound. Each time she expected to see Elliot and his men surrounding her, or Takoda appearing through the trees. But the hours crawled by with no sign of either. As darkness fell, anxiety gnawed at her. What if Takoda had been captured? What if Mary's message hadn't been clear enough? What if this had all been an elaborate trap? Night deepened. An owl called from somewhere nearby, and Catherine sat up sharply, her heart racing. But it was just an owl, not their signal. Then she heard it. 3 short hoots, a pause, then 2 more. Their code from their childhood games. Catherine scrambled to her feet, ignoring the protest from her swollen ankle. "Takoda," she called softly. A shadow detached itself from the darkness beneath the trees. Takoda stood before her, his face solemn in the moonlight. "Catherine," he said, her name on his lips a prayer of thanksgiving. She flew into his arms, her own tightening around his neck as he lifted her off her feet. They clung to each other, neither speaking, the simple fact of their reunion too precious for words. When he finally set her down, Takoda framed her face with his hands. "You made it. Did you doubt I would?" She smiled through tears. "Never." His thumb brushed away a tear from her cheek. "But the journey is not over. Elliot's men are everywhere. We must keep moving." Catherine nodded. "Where will we go?" "North, to Wyoming Territory first, then perhaps to Canada." Takoda's eyes were grave. "It will not be an easy life, Catherine." "I don't need easy," she said. "I only need you." He smiled then, the rare, beautiful smile that had captured her heart all those years ago by Eagle Creek. "Then we will make our way together." A sudden noise, the snap of a twig, the rustle of leaves, made them both freeze. Takoda pushed Catherine behind him, drawing his knife in one fluid motion. "Well, well," Captain Elliot's voice came from the darkness. "What a touching reunion." He stepped into the moonlight, pistol raised. Behind him, 6 soldiers fanned out, rifles aimed at Takoda. "How did you find us?" Catherine asked, her voice hollow with despair. Elliot smiled coldly. "Your maid was quite helpful once we explained the consequences of obstruction. And I've had men watching this valley for days. Your Apache isn't as clever as he thinks." Takoda's grip tightened on his knife, though he must have known how useless it was against so many guns. "Drop the knife, savage," Elliot ordered, "or I'll have my men shoot you where you stand." "No." Catherine moved to stand beside Takoda. "If you harm him, I swear I'll never marry you. I'll tell everyone what you did, how you murdered an innocent woman, how you persecuted us simply for loving each other. And who would believe you?" Elliot's voice was silk over steel. "The colonel's hysterical daughter, infatuated with a savage? You'll be pitied perhaps, but not believed." Catherine felt Takoda tense beside her, knew he was calculating odds, looking for any opening. "There must be something you want," she said desperately to Elliot. "Something besides me." Elliot considered this, his eyes cold. "Perhaps. Your Apache's life for your hand in marriage. A fair exchange, I think." "No," Takoda said quietly. "Catherine, don't." She turned to him, her eyes pleading. "I can't let you die, and I can't let you sacrifice yourself." Takoda's voice was firm. "Not for me." "How touching," Elliot drawled. "But I'm afraid you don't have a choice. Drop the knife, Apache, or my men will fire." Time seemed to slow. Catherine saw Takoda's hand tighten on the knife, saw Elliot's finger move to the trigger of his pistol. In that moment, she knew with terrible clarity what was about to happen. "Wait!" she cried, stepping between them. "There's something you should know, Captain." Elliot raised an eyebrow. "And what might that be?" Catherine took a deep breath. "I'm carrying his child." It was a lie, a desperate, last-ditch attempt to stay Elliot's hand. But the shock on his face was genuine, as was the disgust that followed. "You lie," he said, though doubt had crept into his voice. "It's the truth," Catherine insisted. "Kill him, and you'll be raising another man's child, an Apache's child. Is that what you want, Captain? Is that the legacy you envision for yourself?" Elliot's face contorted with rage. "You whore," he spat. "You filthy, savage, loving whore." His arm swung up, the pistol now aimed at Catherine's heart. "I'll kill you both." What happened next occurred with such speed that Catherine could never afterward piece together the exact sequence. Takoda lunged forward just as Elliot fired. The bullet meant for Catherine struck Takoda in the shoulder, spinning him around but not stopping his momentum. His knife found its mark in Elliot's chest, even as the captain fired again. The second shot went wild. Elliot staggered backward, looking down in disbelief at the knife hilt protruding from his chest. Blood bubbled from his lips as he tried to speak. Then he crumpled to the ground. For a heartbeat, no one moved. The soldiers stood frozen, rifles half raised, seemingly unsure what to do now that their commander had fallen. It was Lieutenant Reed who broke the tableau, stepping forward with his hand raised. "Hold your fire," he ordered the men. "No more bloodshed." Catherine knelt beside Takoda, who had fallen to one knee, his hand pressed to his bleeding shoulder. "How bad is it?" she whispered. "I'll live," he replied, though his face was grey with pain. Reed approached them cautiously, his rifle lowered. "Miss Thornton," he said formally, "I believe you should know that I submitted my report this morning regarding the incident with the Apache woman." Catherine looked up at him, uncomprehending. "What does that have to do with us?" "My report stated that Captain Elliot ordered the mission with false information, that he manufactured a threat to pursue a personal vendetta." Reed's eyes were steady. "It also stated that the killing of the woman was against orders and is being investigated as a possible crime." Understanding dawned on Catherine. "You're saying—" "I'm saying that Captain Elliot's actions were already under scrutiny. And now—" Reed glanced at Elliot's body. "Now I will report that he died attempting to murder 2 unarmed civilians." Takoda had risen shakily to his feet, supported by Catherine. "Why would you help us?" he asked Reed. The lieutenant's face was grim. "Because I saw a man holding his dead love in a stream running red with her blood, because I've seen enough death, and because sometimes what's right matters more than what's ordered." He turned to his men. "We found nothing here. No one. We will return to the fort and report that Captain Elliot was killed by a mountain lion while searching alone. Is that understood?" The soldiers nodded, some reluctantly, others with evident relief. Reed looked back at Catherine and Takoda. "You should go far from here. The colonel is your father. He may not accept Reed's version of events, and there will be questions." Catherine felt tears well in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. Reed nodded once, then gestured to his men. "Move out." They left as silently as they had come, taking Elliot's body with them. Catherine and Takoda stood alone in the moonlight, hardly able to believe what had just happened. "Is it over?" Catherine asked softly. "Truly over?" Takoda pulled her close with his good arm. "For now. But we should still leave this place. Lieutenant Reed has given us a chance, but we must take it." Catherine nodded against his chest. "Where will we go?" "I have horses hidden nearby. We'll ride north, as I said, to Wyoming, then perhaps beyond." He tilted her face up to his. "Wherever we go, we'll be together. That's all that matters." Catherine reached into her pocket and withdrew the stone he had given her all those years ago by Eagle Creek. "Do you remember what you said when you gave me this?" Takoda smiled. "For courage. I've carried it with me every day since." She pressed it into his hand. "Now it's your turn to carry it for the journey ahead." Takoda closed his fingers around the stone, then leaned down to kiss her, gently at first, then with growing passion. When they finally parted, he rested his forehead against hers. "The journey will be long," he said. "The path uncertain." Catherine smiled. "But we'll walk it together." "Together," Takoda agreed. "Always." As dawn broke over the hidden valley where the rivers met, they mounted their horses and rode north, leaving behind the blood and dust of their past. Before them lay an unknown future. Difficult, perhaps, but faced hand in hand. And for now, that was enough. Thank you so much for staying with us until the end of this beautiful story. If it touched your heart, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel, leave a like, and share it with someone who also believes in the power of love. Your comments and support, from the bottom of our hearts, keep us inspired to continue telling stories filled with romance, redemption, and unexpected twists. At the end of this video, another story from our channel will appear. Click it and let yourself be surprised by yet another emotional journey like this one.